On what should have been just another Tuesday finalizing our perfect wedding, I received a call that demolished months of planning and revealed the true nature of my future family. Vivian Hargrove, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, had canceled our reservation at Rosewood Manor, the breathtaking historic venue we'd been planning around for nearly a year. And she'd done it completely behind our backs, without a single word to either of us. But it was what happened next, when my 10-year-old daughter Maddie opened a folder at our emergency family gathering, that truly left everyone in that room speechless. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was exactly 18 days before our wedding date. The invitations had been sent weeks ago, deposits paid, vendors confirmed, and final details were falling into place. I was in my home studio reviewing the seating arrangements one last time when my phone rang. The display showed Rosewood Manor Events. With a smile, I answered, assuming they were calling about some minor final detail. "Hello? Is this Olivia Summers?" The woman's voice was professionally sympathetic in a way that instantly sent a chill down my spine. "Yes, speaking. I'm calling about your wedding reservation for the 24th. I'm afraid there's been a situation." I gripped the edge of my desk, feeling the cool surface beneath my fingertips as I tried to keep my voice steady. "What kind of situation?" "Well," she hesitated. "Your reservation has been canceled." The room seemed to spin around me. "Canceled? That's impossible. I didn't cancel anything." According to our records, Mrs. Vivian Hargrove called yesterday afternoon. She identified herself as the mother of the groom and the primary financial contact for the event. She said the wedding was being, another pause, relocated. She requested a full refund of all deposits, which was processed back to her credit card. My breath caught in my throat. Vivian had canceled our venue. The venue we'd visited together. The one with the magnificent stone terrace overlooking the valley. The one with the century-old oak trees we'd planned to marry beneath. And she'd done it behind our backs. "There must be some mistake," I managed to say. "Vivian isn't the primary contact. My fiancé and I made all the arrangements ourselves." "I understand your confusion, Ms. Summers, but our records show Mrs. Hargrove made the initial reservation and paid all deposits from her personal account. We assumed you were aware." I wasn't aware. Not at all. Nathan had told me we were splitting the costs. He'd insisted on handling the venue payments himself while I coordinated with the other vendors. Now I understood why. I hung up after getting as many details as I could, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I called Nathan immediately. "Hey babe, just wrapping up a client meeting. What's up?" His voice was warm, casual, as if the world hadn't just tilted on its axis. "Your mother canceled our wedding venue." The words came out flat, factual, devoid of the hurricane of emotions swirling inside me. Silence. Then, "What? No, that can't be right." Rosewood Manor just called me. "Vivian canceled everything yesterday and took back all the deposits. Did you know she was the one who paid for it?" Another stretch of silence. "Too long?" "Nathan? Let me call her," he finally said. "There has to be an explanation. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. The venue is booked solid for the next 8 months. There's no misunderstanding that can fix this." My voice cracked. "Did you know she paid for everything?" "Liv, please let me handle this. I'll call you right back." But he didn't call right back. 3 hours passed. The afternoon sun moved across my studio window, shadows lengthening as the day slipped away. I called him 4 more times. Texts went unread. Finally, at 7:15 p.m., he texted, "Family meeting at my parents' house." 8:30. "Mom wants to explain. Please bring Maddie." That was it. No apology, no outrage on my behalf, just a summons to his mother's house. Like I was being called to the principal's office to be disciplined. I sat staring at the text, something cold and hard forming in my chest. Nathan and I had been together for 4 years. I was a single mother with a young daughter when we met. He was thoughtful, stable, patient with Maddie, everything I thought I needed. His family had money, old money from generations of successful pharmaceutical development. Maddie's father had left us comfortable but nowhere near wealthy. I'd always been conscious of the gap between the Hargroves and us, but Nathan had insisted it didn't matter. Yet here I was, being summoned to Vivian Hargrove's immaculate colonial mansion to discuss how she'd single-handedly derailed our wedding plans. And Nathan expected me to bring my daughter to witness my humiliation. I found Maddie in her bedroom, headphones on, sketching in her notebook. At 10, she was already showing hints of the woman she would become, perceptive, creative, with her own quiet strength. I sat on the edge of her bed and waited for her to notice me. She pulled off her headphones. "Mom, what's wrong? You look like when Mrs. Cantwell gave me a B- on my art project." Despite everything, I smiled. "We need to go to the Hargroves tonight. There's a situation with the wedding." Her eyes narrowed immediately. What did Mrs. Hargrove do now? Out of the mouths of babes, Maddie had always seen through Vivian's polite facade, noticing the subtle ways she excluded us or emphasized the differences between our families. I'd chalked it up to normal kid intuition, but now I wondered if my daughter had been the perceptive one all along. "She canceled our wedding venue," I said, deciding Maddie deserved the truth. "And apparently she's the one who paid for it, not Nathan and me like I thought." Maddie's face flushed with indignation. "She can't do that. It's your wedding." "Well, legally, if she paid for it, she can. But that's not fair." "We're going over there to hear her explanation." I hesitated. "Do you have to go?" I considered, letting her stay home. But something told me I needed her with me tonight. My touchstone. My reminder of what mattered beyond the Hargrove family drama. "Yes, sweetie. I think I need you there." Little did I know that within the hour, my quiet, perceptive daughter would stand up in the Hargroves' formal living room and reveal a secret that would change everything. A secret about who had really been funding our perfect wedding all along. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The drive to the Hargrove estate took 30 minutes. Each passing mile ratcheted up my anxiety as we left our modest suburb behind and entered the exclusive neighborhood where Nathan's family had lived for generations. The sprawling property appeared through a row of perfectly trimmed hedges, all manicured grounds and warm golden lights illuminating the colonial facade. It had once impressed me. Now it felt like a fortress of privilege I'd foolishly tried to enter. As we pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed all the family cars were already there. Nathan's Tesla, his sister Amelia's Range Rover, his father Richard's vintage Jaguar. The united front was assembled. "Remember," I said to Maddie, as we approached the imposing front door, "whatever happens in there, we have each other." She squeezed my hand. "Always, Mom." I had no idea then that within the hour, my quiet, observant daughter would change the course of our futures forever. The Hargroves' formal living room was exactly what you'd expect. Persian rugs over hardwood, floors, original artwork on paneled walls, and furniture that belonged in a design magazine rather than a home where people actually lived. Vivian sat in the center of an antique sofa, back straight, a strand of pearls perfectly aligned against her cashmere sweater. Richard, Nathan's father, stood by the fireplace, drink in hand, his expression unreadable beneath his silver hair. Nathan and his sister Amelia sat on opposite ends of another sofa, while Amelia's husband, Gregory, hovered awkwardly near a gleaming bar cart. The air felt thick with tension as Maddie and I entered. 7 pairs of eyes turned toward us, but only Nathan rose to greet us. "Liv, Maddie," he said, kissing my cheek as if everything was normal. His cologne, the one I'd given him for Christmas, smelled suddenly cloying. "Thanks for coming." I didn't respond to his greeting. My eyes locked with Vivian's. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a smile of welcome or warmth. It was the smile of someone who held all the cards and knew it. "Olivia, dear," she said. "I'm so glad you could join us." Her gaze shifted. "And Maddie, too. How lovely." Maddie squeezed my hand tighter, her small act of solidarity keeping me steady. "Why did you cancel our venue, Vivian?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries entirely. Richard cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all sit down first." "I'd rather stand," I said. Nathan touched my elbow. "Honey, please, let's just hear Mom out." I looked at him, then really looked at him. His handsome face showed concern, but not indignation, not the anger of someone whose wedding plans had been sabotaged, not the protective instinct of a man standing by his future wife. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. A coldness settled in my chest, a clarity that hadn't been there before. I was seeing Nathan, truly seeing him, for perhaps the first time. I sat down, pulling Maddie beside me on a love seat positioned directly across from Vivian. "Fine, I'm listening. Vivian smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her immaculate slacks. "I know you're upset, and I understand why, but I need you to know I had the family's best interests at heart." "The family?" I repeated. "You mean your family?" "Soon to be your family too, dear," she corrected with a tight smile. "And as such, certain standards need to be maintained. Rosewood Manor is lovely for a corporate event, or perhaps a charity fundraiser, but for a Hargrove wedding, it simply wasn't appropriate." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Not appropriate?" "Mother," Nathan interjected, "Olivia and I love that venue. We chose it together." Vivian waved a dismissive hand. "You were being sentimental, Nathan. The acoustics are terrible for the string quartet. The dining facilities are outdated. The guest list we discussed simply wouldn't fit comfortably in their spaces." "The guest list we discussed?" I echoed, looking between Vivian and Nathan. "What guest list is that?" A flicker of guilt crossed Nathan's face. "Mom had some suggestions about additional guests. People from the industry, some family connections, people who matter," Vivian finished for him. I looked at Nathan, waiting for him to defend our choices, to say something, anything that showed he was on my side. He shifted, uncomfortably, then looked down at his hands. "So you canceled our venue," I said slowly, turning back to Vivian, "because you didn't think it was good enough for a Hargrove wedding, without asking us, without discussing it with me." "I've already secured Evergreen Hall," Vivian said as if this solved everything. "It's much more suitable. They had a cancellation for the same weekend. I've doubled the deposit to hold it for us. The ballroom will accommodate the expanded guest list beautifully, and their chef is internationally renowned." "Expanded guest list," I repeated. The words felt foreign in my mouth. "And I suppose you've chosen new invitations too? New flowers, new everything? Oh, that reminds me." Vivian reached for a leather portfolio on the coffee table. "I've taken the liberty of contacting several vendors. The ones you selected were charming, but not quite the caliber a Hargrove event requires." My head was spinning. I glanced at Richard, hoping to find some voice of reason, but he simply sipped his scotch, watching the scene unfold with detached interest. Amelia examined her manicure, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. And Nathan, my Nathan, the man I was supposed to marry in 18 days, sat there silent, torn between his mother and me, but not actually making a choice, not actually standing up, not actually speaking. His silence told me everything I needed to. "No, you know," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "When I got that call today, I was convinced there had been a mistake. I thought you might have confused dates or venues. I never imagined you'd deliberately sabotage our wedding plans." Sabotage is a harsh word, Vivian replied coolly. I've improved your wedding immeasurably. You should be thanking me. I almost laughed. Thanking you? For going behind my back? For making decisions about my wedding without even consulting me? Our wedding, Nathan corrected quietly. And Mom was just trying to help. I turned to him, waiting for more. Waiting for the defense, the outrage, the moment where he would finally stand up to his mother for me. But it didn't come. Just trying to help, I repeated softly. By canceling the venue we chose, by changing our guest list, by replacing our vendors. That's not help, Nathan. That's control. Vivian sighed dramatically. This reaction is precisely why I handled things directly. I knew you wouldn't understand the social obligations of marrying into a family like ours. A family like yours, I said. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Maddie, who had been silent until now, suddenly straightened beside me. Her small face was flushed with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Anger, yes, but also something else. Determination. Mrs. Hargrove, she said, her voice clear and surprisingly firm for a 10-year-old addressing an intimidating adult. You said, you paid for the venue, right? Vivian looked surprised to be addressed directly by my daughter, but quickly recovered. Yes, Maddie. The financial arrangements for the wedding have been my responsibility. Maddie nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself. Then she looked at me, a question in her eyes. I wasn't sure what she wanted, but I trusted her instincts implicitly. I nodded. She stood up, this child of mine, straight-backed and unafraid in a room full of adults who'd been playing power games around her. I have something to say, Maddie announced, looking first at Vivian, then at Nathan, and finally at me. The room fell completely silent. Even Richard lowered his drink. I had no idea what my daughter was about to reveal. I only knew, watching her stand there with her father's determined chin and her hands clasped tightly in front of her, that whatever came next would change everything. And in that suspended moment, that breath before the plunge, I felt something shift in the air around us. The balance of power in the room was about to tilt, and somehow, incredibly, it would be my 10-year-old daughter who would tip the scales. Maddie took a deep breath, looked Vivian straight in the eye, and was about to speak words that I somehow knew would make everyone in that pristine living room gasp. But before she could say anything, Richard cleared his throat again. Perhaps this isn't an appropriate conversation for a child, he suggested, his tone gentle but dismissive. I think we should hear what Maddie has to say, I countered, finding my voice. Since she's the only person in this room who hasn't been keeping secrets. Nathan frowned. Liv, don't drag Maddie into adult matters. I'm not dragging her into anything, I replied evenly. She has something to say, and I think we should listen. Vivian's perfectly lined lips pursed in disapproval. Really, Olivia? Using your child as a mouthpiece is beneath you. Maddie's chin lifted higher. I'm not anybody's mouthpiece, she said clearly. And I know something you don't think I know. The tension in the room thickened, almost palpable now. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Amelia suddenly seemed far more interested in the conversation than her manicure. Even Gregory moved away from the bar cart, sensing something significant was about to happen. Go ahead, sweetheart, I said to Maddie, my heart racing with both fear and pride. Say what you need to say. Maddie stood a little straighter, her gaze moving from face to face before settling back on Vivian. She took another deep breath, and I watched my little girl prepare to change the course of all our lives. But before I tell you what Maddie said next, before I tell you how she changed everything with just a few sentences, you need to understand how we got here in the first place. You need to know who we were before the Hargroves entered our lives. My name is Olivia Summers. I'm 35 years old, the owner of a growing interior design business, and a single mother raising a daughter on my own. At least I was raising her on my own until Nathan Hargrove walked into my life 4 years ago. I grew up in Cedarwood, a modest suburb about 40 minutes from Northfield Hills, where the Hargroves had their estate. My father was a high school English teacher, and my mother ran a small flower shop downtown. We lived in a cozy Cape Cod with a garden in the back and furniture that told stories of yard sales and family hand-me-downs. We weren't poor, but we were careful with money. Every purchase was considered, every splurge planned for months in advance. When I was 19, I met Craig Bennett at community college. He was studying business management and working nights at his uncle's restaurant. He had an easy laugh and ambitious dreams, and by the end of my first semester, we were inseparable. 2 years later, we were married in my parents' backyard, surrounded by fairy lights and homemade decorations. Craig was smart and driven, always looking for the next opportunity. When I got pregnant with Maddie at 24, he had just started his own food delivery service. We lived in a small apartment, believing completely in his vision, in our future. The business grew steadily. Nothing dramatic, but solid progress. By the time Maddie was 3, we had moved into a modest townhouse with a tiny yard for her to play in and a spare bedroom I converted into my first design studio. We weren't wealthy like the Hargroves, but we were building something. We had plans. We had dreams. And then when Maddie was 6, Craig died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday night. He was making a delivery himself because one of his drivers had called in sick. Just like that, our life together ended. What most people don't tell you about. Grief is how mundane it becomes. After the shock, after the funeral, after the casseroles from neighbors stop coming, you're left with paperwork. So much paperwork. Insurance forms, business documents, bank accounts to transfer, passwords to recover. The business of death is exhausting. It was during this time that I discovered something about Craig I hadn't known. He had taken out a substantial life insurance policy after Maddie was born, and he had set up a trust fund for her education and future. The policy also paid off our mortgage. Craig had protected us, even in his absence. We weren't rich, nothing like the Hargroves, but we were secure. Maddie and I adjusted to our new normal. I expanded my design business, working from home to be there when she got back from school. We had pizza nights on Fridays and pancake breakfasts on Sundays. We honored Craig's memory by living fully, just as he would have wanted. 3 years after Craig died, I met Nathan Hargrove at a charity auction for the local art museum. My design studio had donated a free consultation package, and I was networking, handing out business cards, hoping to make connections. Nathan was there representing his family's foundation. He was different from the men I'd dated in college, polished, confident, with an easy charm that came from a lifetime of privilege. But there was something genuine about him, too. He listened when I talked about my work. He asked thoughtful questions about Maddie. When he called the next day to ask me to dinner, I surprised myself by saying yes. Our relationship developed slowly. I was cautious, protective of the life Maddie and I had rebuilt. Nathan was patient. He brought thoughtful gifts, remembered details from our conversations, never pushed for more than I was ready to give. When he finally met Maddie, 6 months into our relationship, he brought her a set of professional drawing pencils because I'd mentioned she loved to sketch. "What do you think of him?" I asked Maddie that night after Nathan left. She considered, the question with the seriousness only a child can muster. "He's nice," she said finally, "but he's not Dad." "No one will ever be Dad," I assured her. "That's not what I'm looking for." "Then what are you looking for?" she asked. I didn't have a perfect answer. Companionship, someone kind, someone who respects what we've built together, you and me. Maddie nodded, accepting this explanation with the quiet wisdom that sometimes startled me. "As long as we're still us," she said. "Always," I promised. Meeting Nathan's family came later. He had been vague about them at first, mentioning their pharmaceutical business, but focusing more on his own work with their charitable foundation. In retrospect, I should have recognized his hesitation as a warning. The first time he took us to the Hargrove estate, Maddie whispered, "It looks like a museum, Mom," as we pulled up the long driveway. She wasn't wrong. The colonial mansion with its manicured grounds felt more like a showpiece than a home. Vivian Hargrove greeted us in the foyer, her appraising gaze taking in my simple dress and Maddie's department store outfit in one sweeping glance. "Nathan has told us so little about you," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How refreshing to finally meet. That evening was a masterclass in subtle undermining. Vivian asked about my little business and seemed surprised when I explained that I had commercial clients. She inquired about Maddie's schooling and made a point of mentioning the prestigious private academy that Nathan and Amelia had attended. She asked about my family background in a way that made it clear she was assessing bloodlines rather than showing genuine interest. When I mentioned that Craig had been in the restaurant business, her interest briefly piqued. "Oh, which restaurants?" she asked, the first direct question of the evening. "He founded Bennett Delivery Services," I said. "Oh," her disappointment was evident. "I'm not familiar with it." I didn't bother explaining that Craig's company had been acquired by a larger food service corporation after his death. It wouldn't have changed her assessment. As the evening continued, I noticed something that troubled me more than Vivian's thinly veiled condescension. Nathan changed around his family. The thoughtful, attentive man I'd been dating for nearly a year became quieter, deferential, checking his mother's reactions before offering opinions. He laughed at his father's mildly inappropriate jokes. He didn't contradict Vivian when she spoke over me. On the drive home, Maddie was unusually quiet. "What did you think?" I asked, though I was almost afraid to hear her answer. She stared out the window for a long moment before responding. "Mrs. Hargrove doesn't like us very much." "She doesn't know us yet," I said, though I wasn't convinced this was the problem. "No," Maddie insisted. "She doesn't like us. She kept looking at you like you had gum stuck to your shoe." Out of the mouths of babes. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Well, it's a good thing we don't need her to like us, isn't it?" But as my relationship with Nathan deepened, as he became a more permanent fixture in our lives, I found myself hoping that Vivian would warm to us. For Nathan's sake, I told myself. I made efforts, bringing thoughtful hostess gifts, complimenting her home, showing interest in the family history that clearly meant so much to her. Nothing changed. If anything, as Nathan and I became more serious, Vivian's behavior grew more territorial. She would call during our dinner dates with urgent family matters. She would reminisce about Nathan's ex-girlfriend Charlotte, whose family apparently owned an internationally recognized cosmetics company. She would plan family functions and inform me of them last minute, then act disappointed when I couldn't rearrange my client appointments to attend. Through it all, Nathan remained mostly silent. He would occasionally say, "Mom, please," in a tired voice, but he never truly confronted her behavior. "You have to understand," he would tell me privately. "Family is everything to my mother. She'll come around eventually." When Nathan proposed on our 3rd anniversary, I hesitated. Not because I didn't love him, I did, but because I wasn't sure I wanted to marry into the Hargrove family dynamics. But Nathan promised things would be different once we were married. Vivian would have to accept me then. We would set boundaries. We would build our own life. I wanted to believe him. I said yes. And that's how I found myself a year later, sitting in Vivian Hargrove's pristine living room, watching my 10-year-old daughter stand up to reveal a truth that none of us were prepared to hear. The year of our engagement was a study in small compromises that grew larger with time. Each one seemed reasonable on its own. Each one I justified as being flexible, mature, understanding. But looking back, I can see how they formed a pattern. a pattern I had been too close to recognize. It started with small things. Vivian insisted on hosting our engagement party at the Hargrove estate. "It's tradition," Nathan explained. "All Hargrove engagement announcements happen at home." I had imagined something more intimate at my favorite local bistro, surrounded by friends who had supported Maddie and me through our hardest years. But I agreed to the estate, telling myself it was just one evening. The guest list for that party was my first real warning. Of the 100 people in attendance, I recognized fewer than 20. The rest were Hargrove connections, business associates, pharmaceutical industry executives, country club members, and distant relatives who looked at me with the same assessing gaze as Vivian. My closest friends felt out of place among crystal champagne flutes and servers in white gloves. "Just smile and be yourself," Nathan whispered, squeezing my hand. "They'll love you." But that was the problem. I wasn't being myself. I was being the version of myself that could navigate a Hargrove event. Polite, accommodating, careful not to reveal too much of my background or opinions. After the party, Vivian started calling more frequently, always with suggestions that sounded like directives. "Olivia, dear, about your dress shopping. I've made an appointment at Madame Renault's in the city. She's designed for the family for generations. Olivia, I hope you're not set on those quaint DIY invitations you mentioned. The Hargrove wedding announcements have always been engraved by Westbrooks on maple. Olivia, I've spoken with Reverend Thompson at St. Andrew's. He's holding the date for us, of course." The first time she did this, I gently pushed back. "Vivian, I appreciate your help, but Nathan and I were thinking of something less formal. For the invitations." Her response was immediate and practiced. "Oh, I understand completely. It's just that there are certain expectations when one marries into a family with our history. But of course, it's your decision." The implied disapproval hung in the air like expensive perfume, overwhelming but difficult to object to directly. Nathan's response when I brought these conversations to him was always the same. "It means so much to her, Liv, and honestly, it takes pressure off us to have her handle these details." Each time I yielded, it became easier to yield the next time. The dress appointment turned into a full-day affair where Vivian, Amelia, and 2 of Vivian's friends critiqued every gown until I finally agreed to a custom design that Vivian deemed suitable. The invitations became formal affairs with the Hargrove family crest embossed in gold. The simple wedding we had discussed became an event for 250 guests. Through it all, Nathan remained cheerfully oblivious to my discomfort. "Mom's in her element," he would say. "Just let her enjoy this." But it wasn't enjoyment I saw in Vivian's eyes as she systematically reshaped our wedding plans. It was ownership, control, a message that while I might be marrying her son, I would never truly be part of their world unless I played by their rules. The venue was actually one of the few choices Nathan and I had managed to secure for ourselves. We had found Rosewood Manor during a weekend drive, stumbling upon its stone walls and tree-lined paths by happy accident. The owner, a retired architect named Helen, had restored the historic property as a labor of love. It wasn't as grand as the cathedral-like St. Andrew's that Vivian favored, but it had character, warmth, and an intimate beauty that felt right to us. When we told the Hargroves about our choice, Vivian's disapproval was immediate. "Outdoor weddings are so unpredictable," she said. "And what about the reception? Surely they don't have proper facilities." "They have a beautiful glass conservatory," I explained, "and contingency plans for weather." "Well," she sniffed, "I suppose it could be charming in a rustic way. I thought that was the end of it. I thought we had won this small battle. I had no idea she was merely retreating to plan a more decisive strike." Throughout these months, Maddie watched everything with quiet attention. She had always been observant, but since Craig's death, she had developed an almost uncanny ability to read people's intentions. While I was making excuses for Vivian's behavior, Maddie was cataloging every slight, every manipulative comment, every moment when Nathan failed to stand up for us. "Mom," she said one evening after a particularly tense dinner at the Hargrove estate, "do you remember what you said when you started dating Nathan? That you wanted someone who respects what we built together?" I nodded, surprised she had remembered that conversation so clearly. "I don't think the Hargroves respect what we built," she said simply. "I don't think they even see it." Her words troubled me, but I dismissed them as the perspective of a child who was still adjusting to the idea of sharing her mother. "They're just different from us," I told her. "Change is hard for everyone." But the changes were becoming harder to justify. As the wedding approached, Vivian's interventions grew bolder. She rescheduled my hair and makeup trials without consulting me. She changed the menu we had selected, claiming allergy concerns among guests I had never met. She even tried to convince me that Maddie should wear a different dress than the one we had carefully chosen together. Amelia's goddaughter wore the most beautiful gown in the Thornfield wedding last spring, Vivian told me over lunch one day. "I've already spoken to her mother about borrowing it for Maddie." This finally was a step too far. "Maddie's dress is already purchased," I said firmly. "She loves it, and she's wearing it." Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly, her smile never wavering. "Of course, dear. It was just a thought." That night, I found Maddie sitting on her bedroom floor, her junior bridesmaid dress spread around her. She was carefully sewing something into the hem, a small red patch barely visible against the pale blue fabric. "What's that, sweetie?" I asked. She looked up, slightly guilty. "It's a piece of Dad's old tie, the red one he wore to my kindergarten graduation. I wanted him there with me." My heart squeezed painfully in my chest. "He would love that." "Mrs. Hargrove wanted me to wear a different dress," Maddie said, returning to her careful stitches. "I heard her talking to you." "But you're not going to," I assured her. "This is your dress," she nodded. "Good, because Dad belongs at your wedding, even if it's just like this." She patted the small red patch. That moment should have been my wake-up call. The realization that in accommodating Vivian's vision, I was allowing Craig's memory, and everything Maddie and I had built in his absence, to be quietly erased from my wedding day. But I was already caught in the Hargrove gravitational pull, orbiting around their expectations, their traditions, their sense of what was appropriate. It would take something far more dramatic than a hidden patch of fabric to break free. 2. Weeks before the wedding, Vivian insisted on a final venue visit to coordinate the decorations. Nathan was tied up with work, so Maddie and I met Vivian and her chosen wedding planner, not the one Nathan and I had hired, at Rosewood Manor. As Helen showed us around, Vivian's distaste was evident in every pinched comment and dismissive glance. The stone pathways were uneven and hazardous for older guests. The conservatory was drafty. The bridal suite was embarrassingly small. "Mom loves the venue, Mrs. Hargrove," Maddie said suddenly. She cried when we first saw it because it reminded her of where she and my dad used to have picnics. This wasn't strictly true. I had teared up because the stained glass windows in the conservatory resembled ones from my childhood church. But the protective intent behind Maddie's words touched me deeply. Vivian's smile tightened. "How sweet. But weddings aren't about the past, dear. They're about new beginnings." The dismissal of Craig's memory was so casual, so complete that it took my breath away. I opened my mouth to object, but no words came. That evening, I finally voiced my concerns to Nathan. "Your mother doesn't seem to understand that Maddie and I come with our own history, our own traditions." Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mom is just old-fashioned. Family legacy means everything to her." "But we're going to be your family too," I insisted. "Maddie and me." "Of course you are," he said, kissing my forehead. "Once we're married, things will settle down. Mom will back off." I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew Vivian Hargrove would never voluntarily relinquish control. and I was beginning to fear that Nathan would never ask her to. 1 week later, I received the call from Rosewood Manor, and everything I had been pushing aside, every doubt I had been smothering, suddenly came rushing to the surface. Vivian had canceled our venue behind our backs, without discussion, without regard, for our wishes. And now, in her formal living room, with Maddie standing before the assembled Hargroves, I was about to discover just how far the deception went. "Mrs. Hargrove," Maddie began, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. "You didn't pay for our wedding venue." Vivian's perfectly arched eyebrow rose a fraction. "I beg your pardon?" "You didn't pay for it," Maddie repeated more firmly this time. "My dad did." The room went completely still. I felt a cold wave wash over me, starting at my scalp and trickling down to my fingertips. What was Maddie talking about? Vivian recovered quickly, letting out a small, condescending laugh. "Maddie, dear, I understand this is confusing for you, but I assure you the financial arrangements for this wedding have been managed by me. The statements from Rosewood Manor came directly to my account." Maddie shook her head. "No, they didn't. The payments came from the trust fund my dad set up before he died." She turned to me, her eyes seeking permission. "Mom, I wasn't going to say anything, but I can't let her lie about this." Nathan leaned forward. "Maddie, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Maddie interrupted, reaching into her jacket pocket. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this in Mom's office last month when I was looking for colored paper for my art project." My mind raced, trying to understand what document Maddie could possibly have found. "I kept all of Craig's financial papers in a locked filing cabinet. Except, it's an email," Maddie continued, unfolding the paper. "From Mr. Davidson at the bank. It says, 'Confirming your instructions to release $28,000 from the Bennett Family Trust to Rosewood Manor for wedding venue deposit and initial payment.'" She looked directly at Nathan. "And there's more. It has a list of all the other wedding expenses being paid from Mom's trust fund." The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian's face had gone rigid, a muscle twitching near her jawline. Richard set his drink down with a heavy thud. Amelia looked between Nathan and me, her mouth slightly open in surprise. And Nathan. Nathan looked caught, trapped between alarm and shame. I stood up slowly, crossing to Maddie. My legs felt unsteady, beneath me. "Let me see that, sweetheart." She handed me the paper. It was indeed an email confirmation from our family trust manager dated 5 months earlier. I recognized it immediately. I had printed it for my records and filed it away. But seeing it now, in this context, forced me to confront what I had willfully been ignoring. Nathan and I had never directly discussed who was paying for what. He had offered to handle the venue and major vendors, saying his family wanted to contribute. I had assumed they were covering those costs, an arrangement that already made me uncomfortable, but that I had accepted as part of marrying into wealth. Meanwhile, I had quietly authorized payments from Craig's trust fund for those same expenses, thinking I was paying my fair share. But the money had never gone where I thought it had. Nathan had redirected my funds that were specifically from Craig, meant to take care of Maddie and me. Nathan. My voice sounded strange even to my own ears, hollow and distant. "What is this?" He stood up, running both hands through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing, but now recognized as his tell when cornered. "Liv, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you took money from my late husband's trust fund, let me believe your family was paying for the venue, and then let your mother cancel it without telling me." He flinched. "The money is safe. It's just, Mom wanted to handle the arrangements her way, and I knew you'd resist if you thought you were contributing financially. So I redirected the funds. They're still yours. They're just not spent yet." "Not spent yet," I repeated, "because your mother canceled everything. I paid for—" Vivian cleared her throat. Nathan, what is she talking about? I thought we agreed the family would cover the wedding costs. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. We did, he said quickly. But Olivia wanted to contribute, and I didn't want to hurt her pride by refusing. So I accepted her contribution but set it aside for their future for a house down payment. Without telling me, my voice was flat. I was trying to protect you, Nathan insisted. You're so independent, so determined to pull your own weight. I thought you'd be upset if you knew how much everything really cost. I was going to tell you after the wedding, present it as a surprise. Your money saved for our future home. He sounded almost sincere, as if he truly believed his own explanation, as if the deception had been an act of love rather than control. So where is it? I asked. The money from Craig's trust? Nathan hesitated. It's in an account at the family bank. Under whose name? Another hesitation, longer this time. Mine. But it's for us, Liv, for our future. I felt Maddie's small hand slip into mine, a silent anchor in a world that was rapidly shifting beneath my feet. You took my money, I said slowly. Money that Craig left to secure our future. You directed it into an account I can't access. And then you let your mother dismantle all our wedding plans as if they were hers to change. You're making it sound terrible, Nathan protested. It was a loving gesture. A loving gesture would have been honesty, I replied. This was manipulation from both of you. I turned to Vivian, who was watching the scene unfold with a strange mix of disapproval and calculation in her eyes. You knew, didn't you, about the money? I suspected Nathan had made some arrangement, she admitted, her voice cool. But I assumed it was his own money he was setting aside, not yours. Though I fail to see how this changes anything. The venue was completely unsuitable regardless of who paid the deposit. It changes everything, I said quietly. Because it was never your decision to make. It was mine, my money, my wedding, my choice. Richard Hargrove finally spoke up from his position by the fireplace. Perhaps we should all take a step back and discuss this rationally. The important thing is that no funds have been lost. The deposits can be recovered, the plans adjusted. Adjusted to what Vivian wants, you mean? I said. Adjusted to befit Nathan's position in this community, Richard corrected. There are standards to uphold, expectations to meet. Surely you understand that. I did understand. I understood perfectly now. I had been fighting to maintain some control over my own wedding without realizing the battle had been lost months ago. I had believed I was compromising with a difficult mother-in-law, when in fact I had been systematically removed from decisions that were rightfully mine to make. Nathan, I said, turning back to the man I had agreed to marry. Did you know your mother was going to cancel our venue? He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. She mentioned she was unhappy with it. Did you know she was going to cancel it? I repeated more forcefully. Not exactly. Not the timing. But we had discussed that Evergreen Hall might be more appropriate. We? I echoed. You and your mother discussed changing our wedding venue without me. I knew you were attached to Rosewood, he said, his voice pleading now. I didn't know how to tell you it wouldn't work for the kind of wedding the family expected. The family, I repeated softly. But not our family. Not me and Maddie. Nathan reached for my hand, but I stepped back, out of his reach. The motion felt symbolic somehow, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance that had been growing between us without my fully recognizing it. Liv, please, he said. Let's not blow this out of proportion. We can still have a beautiful wedding at Evergreen. You'll love it once you see it. And afterward, we'll have our lives together, just like we planned. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the one standing before me now. The one who had taken money meant to secure Maddie's future. The one who had conspired with his mother behind my back. The one who, even now, couldn't see what he had done wrong. "What kind of marriage would we have, Nathan?" I asked softly. "One where your mother makes all our important decisions, where you lie to me about our finances, where my opinions and choices don't matter because they don't align with Hargrove expectations?" "You're being dramatic," Vivian cut in. "Everyone compromises in marriage." I turned to her, suddenly calm in the face of her dismissal. "This isn't compromise, Vivian. This is surrender, and I won't do it. Not for you, not for your family name, and not even for Nathan." The room went completely silent. Nathan's face paled. "What are you saying?" I took a deep breath, glancing at Maddie, who stood beside me, her face a mixture of anxiety and fierce pride. My daughter, who had been brave enough to speak the truth when all the adults in the room were dancing around it. "I'm saying no," I told Nathan. "No to Evergreen Hall. No to a wedding planned by your mother. And no to a marriage where my voice doesn't matter. No?" Nathan repeated the word as if it were in a foreign language he barely understood. "What do you mean, no?" "I think she's being perfectly clear," Vivian said coldly. "Olivia has decided to throw a tantrum rather than adapt to the situation." I ignored Vivian, keeping my eyes fixed on Nathan. "I mean, I'm not marrying you. Not like this. Not when you've shown me exactly what our life together would be." The silence that followed was broken only by Amelia's sharp intake of breath. Gregory shifted awkwardly beside her, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. Richard Hargrove's face had hardened into an impassive mask. "You can't be serious," Nathan finally said. "We're getting married in 18 days. Everything is arranged." "Is it?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, everything has been disarranged by your mother with your knowledge." "This is absurd," Vivian declared, standing up with the rigid posture of someone unaccustomed to losing control of a situation. "Nathan, take Olivia home. She's clearly overwhelmed and not thinking clearly. You can discuss this privately." "Don't tell him what to do," Maddie suddenly interjected, her young voice cutting through the tension. "That's the whole problem." All eyes turned to my daughter. Vivian's expression was one of barely concealed outrage at being addressed in such a manner by a child. But there was something else there, too. A flicker of unease, as if Maddie had named a truth too uncomfortable to acknowledge. Nathan stepped toward us, his hands outstretched in a placating gesture. "Liv, Maddie, please. Let's go home and talk about this calmly. Mother, I'll handle this." "Will you?" I asked quietly. "Because you haven't handled anything so far. You've let your mother make our decisions, spent my money without my knowledge, and stood by while she dismissed everything that matters to me and Maddie." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "That's not fair. I've been trying to balance everyone's needs." "No," I corrected him. "You've been trying to please your mother while pretending to support me. There's a difference." "This is ridiculous," Vivian interjected. "Olivia, you're making a scene over a venue. A venue. We're offering you something better, more appropriate." I turned to face her directly. "It's not about the venue, Vivian. It's about respect. It's about honesty. It's about recognizing that I'm an equal partner in this relationship, not a project for you to manage." "Equal?" Vivian's laugh was brittle. "My dear, nothing about this situation is equal. We are offering you entrance into a world you couldn't access on your own. A position in society, financial security, connections that your little design business could never provide." "Mom," Nathan warned, but Vivian was beyond heeding caution now. "Let's be honest," she continued, her voice cutting. "You're a widow with a child and a modest business. Nathan is the heir to one of the oldest family enterprises in the region. This match was always an act of generosity on our part." The room went completely still. Even Richard looked uncomfortable with his wife's bluntness. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes with absolute clarity. "Thank you, Vivian," I said quietly. She looked momentarily taken aback. "For what?" "For finally saying what you've been thinking all along. For making it crystal clear what this marriage would really mean." I turned back to Nathan. "Is that how you see it too? As an act of generosity, elevating the widow and her fatherless child to your social circle?" "No," Nathan protested, glaring at his mother. "Liv, you know that's not how I feel." "Do I?" I asked. "Because you've never once stood up to her. Not when she belittled my business. Not when she questioned my parenting. Not when she systematically dismantled our wedding plans. And not now, when she's made it abundantly clear that she sees me as beneath you." Nathan looked stricken. "I love you, Liv. I love Maddie. You know that." "I know you think you do," I said softly. "But love without respect isn't love at all. It's ownership, and I've already built a life where I belong to myself." I reached for Maddie's hand, squeezing it gently. "We're leaving now." "Liv, wait," Nathan pleaded. "Give me a chance to fix this." I paused, looking at him one last time. In that moment, I saw not just the man I'd thought I would marry, but the boy he still was, torn between the woman he claimed to love and the mother whose approval he had spent a lifetime seeking. I felt a wave of sadness, not just for myself, but for him. "You can't fix this," I told him gently, "because you don't see what's broken." I turned and walked toward the door, Maddie's hand firmly in mine. No one moved to stop us. The sound of our footsteps echoed in the silent room. As we reached the foyer, I heard the click of heels behind us. Amelia had followed us out. "Olivia," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I'm sorry about all of this." I looked at Nathan's sister, trying to gauge her sincerity. In all our interactions, Amelia had always been polite, but distant, clearly taking her cues from Vivian. "Are you?" I asked. She nodded, glancing back toward the living room to ensure we weren't overheard. "Mother has always been controlling with all of us, but especially with Nathan." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What you said in there about him never standing up to her, it's true. He never has. I thought maybe with you, he finally would." "So did I admitted. Amelia sighed. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Hard, but right." The acknowledgement from an unexpected quarter brought tears to my eyes for the first time that evening. I blinked them back, unwilling to let the Hargroves see me cry. "Thank you for saying that," I said. She nodded once, then surprised me by kneeling down to Maddie's level. "That was incredibly brave what you did in there," she told my daughter. "Standing up for your mom like that." Maddie looked at her solemnly. "Someone had to tell the truth." A ghost of a smile crossed Amelia's face. "Yes," she agreed. "Someone did." She straightened up, reaching into her pocket. "Here," she said, pressing a folded check into my hand. "It's not the full amount that was taken, but it's what I can access from my personal account. Nathan will return the rest. I'll make sure of it." I stared at the check, momentarily speechless. It was made out to me for $15,000. "I can't accept." "This," I started to say. "Yes, you can," Amelia insisted. "Consider it an apology from at least one Hargrove who knows better." Before I could respond, the living room door opened. Nathan appeared in the hallway, his face pale and determined. "Go," Amelia whispered. "I'll handle this." We slipped out the front door as Amelia intercepted her brother. The last thing I heard was Nathan calling my name and Amelia firmly telling him, "Let her go. Just for tonight. Let her go." The night air was cool against my face as Maddie and I walked to my car. The Hargrove estate was illuminated behind us, every window glowing with warm light that now seemed deceptive rather than inviting. I felt oddly weightless, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't fully acknowledged I was carrying. "Are you okay, Mom?" Maddie asked as we reached the car. I looked down at my remarkable daughter. So observant, so brave, so wise beyond her years. "Think I will be," I told her truthfully. "Are you?" She considered the question with her characteristic seriousness. "I'm sad," she admitted, "but not because the wedding's off, because Nathan wasn't who we thought he was." "People are complicated," I said, unlocking the car. "Nathan isn't a bad person. He's just—" I searched for the right words. "Not strong enough," Maddie finished for me. "Dad would have stood up for us." The simple truth of her statement caught in my throat. "Yes," I agreed. "He would have." As we drove away from the Hargrove estate, I felt an unexpected sense of peace settling over me. The road ahead was uncertain. There were announcements to make, deposits to reclaim, explanations to give. But for the first time in months, perhaps even years, I was making a choice that honored not just who I was, but who Craig had been, and who Maddie was becoming. In the days that followed, the story of our canceled wedding spread through social circles like wildfire. I imagined Vivian trying desperately to control the narrative, to paint me as unstable or mercenary, but I discovered I didn't care. The people who mattered, my real friends, my clients, the community Maddie and I had built together, rallied around us with unwavering support. Nathan called repeatedly. I let his calls go to voicemail at first, uncertain what more there was to say. When I finally answered 4 days after that fateful night at the Hargrove estate, his voice was ragged with emotion. "Liv, please," he began without preamble. "Give me another chance. I'll make this right." "How?" I asked simply. "I'll stand up to my mother. We'll have the wedding we planned at Rosewood or anywhere else you want. I've already transferred all the money back to your account, more than was taken, to cover any inconvenience." "It was never about the money, Nathan." "Then what?" he asked, a note of frustration creeping into his voice. "Tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it." And there it was, the fundamental misunderstanding at the heart of our relationship. Nathan still saw this as a problem to be fixed, a transaction to be completed. He couldn't grasp that it was about a pattern of behavior, about values fundamentally misaligned. "I don't want to tell you what to do," I said quietly. I wanted a partner who already knew, who understood without being told that respect and honesty aren't negotiable, who would stand with me, not above me or behind me. "I can be that person," he insisted. "I'll change." "Maybe you can," I conceded, "but not for me, Nathan. Not because I'm making it a condition. That kind of change has to come from within." The silence on the line stretched between us like a physical thing, filled with all the words we'd never said, all the boundaries never established. "I do love you," he said finally, his voice small. "I know," I replied, and meant it. But sometimes, love isn't enough. 2 weeks after what should have been my wedding day, I sat on the back porch of our home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The garden Craig had planted years ago was in full bloom, black-eyed Susans and coneflowers nodding in the gentle evening breeze. I sipped tea from my favorite chipped mug, feeling the weight of the past months finally beginning to lift. Maddie pushed open the screen door, the familiar squeak announcing her presence before she settled into the chair beside me. At 10, she was at that precious threshold between childhood and adolescence, sometimes strikingly mature, other times still my little girl. Tonight, she seemed older somehow. "You didn't cry today," she observed, pulling her knees up to her chest. I glanced at her, surprised by the observation. "No, I didn't." "That's good, right?" I considered the question. The first few days after breaking off the engagement had been a blur of tears and administrative tasks, canceling vendors, returning gifts, fielding concerned calls from friends. The wedding that wasn't had consumed almost as much energy as the wedding that might have been. Yes, I said finally. I think it is good. Not because crying is bad, but because I'm starting to feel more like myself again. Maddie nodded, her eyes thoughtful. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner about finding that email. I reached over to squeeze her hand. You have nothing to apologize for. You were trying to protect me. I didn't understand at first, she admitted. When I found it, I thought maybe it was normal for you to pay, but have Mr. Hargrove's family take credit, like a pride thing for them. I smiled at her innocence. That would have been quite a strange arrangement. But then Mrs. Hargrove kept changing everything, and you kept getting quieter, and Nathan never said anything. It didn't seem right. The simple moral clarity of a child. I wished I had listened to my own instincts as readily as Maddie had trusted. Hers? It wasn't right, I agreed, and I'm proud of you for speaking up when you did. She was quiet for a moment, tracing patterns on the arm of her chair. Do you think Nathan loved us? Really loved us? The question caught me off guard with its directness, but I owed her honesty. I think he loved us in the only way he knew how, I said carefully. But true love includes respect and boundaries and honesty. Nathan struggled with those things, because of his mom, partly, I acknowledged, but also because of choices he made. We all have patterns we learn from our families, I continued. But at some point, we have to decide which ones to keep and which ones to change. Maddie considered this. Like how after Dad died, you said we could be sad, but we couldn't stop living. That was a choice, right? My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. Yes, exactly like that. We sat in comfortable silence as the sky deepened from pink to purple. Fireflies began to blink in the garden, the first of the season. Craig had loved fireflies, had spent summer evenings with Maddie catching them in mason jars, admiring their light before releasing them back into the darkness. Mom, Maddie said after a while, I'm glad we didn't have that wedding. I turned to look at her, surprised by the certainty in her voice. It wouldn't have been ours, she explained. It would have been theirs. And we already have something good. Just us. Tears pricked at my eyes. But they weren't tears of loss or regret. They were tears of recognition, of seeing clearly what had been there all along. We do have something good, I agreed. The next morning, a package arrived. The return. A dress was from Amelia Hargrove, which surprised me. Inside was a small velvet box and a handwritten note. Olivia, Nathan asked me to return this to you, but I thought you might prefer to receive it from me rather than him. He's still struggling to understand what happened, still caught between Mom's version of events and the truth. Perhaps he always will be. I want you to know that I admire what you did. It takes courage to walk away from something that looks perfect on the outside when you know it's broken on the inside. It's a courage I wish I'd had years ago. Take care of yourself and that remarkable daughter of yours. Amelia. P.S. Mom. Is furious that some guests have sent their wedding gifts directly to you rather than returning them. I find this oddly satisfying. I opened the velvet box. Inside was my engagement ring, a Hargrove family heirloom that Vivian had insisted Nathan give me instead of choosing something new. The large diamond was flanked by smaller emeralds set in platinum. It was objectively beautiful, but it had never felt like mine. I had worn it like a costume piece, a prop in a play where I was perpetually miscast. I closed the box and set it aside, feeling nothing but relief. Some endings are also beginnings, though we rarely recognize them as such in the moment. That afternoon, I called Helen at Rosewood Manor. I had avoided the conversation, ashamed of the cancellation and the drama that surrounded it. Olivia, she exclaimed when she recognized my voice. I've been hoping you'd call. I'm so sorry about everything, I began, but she cut me off gently. No apologies needed. I've been in this business long enough to recognize when someone is being pushed into choices that aren't their own. Her voice was kind, without judgment. How are you doing? better than I expected, I admitted. Though I'm sorry we lost the venue. It really was perfect. About that, Helen said, an odd note entering her voice. The Hargrove deposit was indeed returned, but then I received another payment shortly after, an anonymous donation to hold the date. Anonymous? I repeated, confused. Who would do that? The bank transfer came from something called the Bennett Family Trust, Helen continued. I assumed you might know something about it. I nearly dropped the phone. That's impossible. I never authorized. I stopped mid-sentence as understanding dawned. Maddie, I whispered. Pardon? My daughter, I explained. She must have, I'm not sure how, but she must have found a way to transfer the funds. Remarkable girl you have there, Helen said, admiration evident in her voice. She called me herself, actually, said, you might need the space for something else someday, and it shouldn't go to someone else just because plans had changed. Tears filled my eyes for the second time in as many days. My daughter, my fierce protector, had somehow managed to reclaim the one piece of our wedding plans that had truly been ours. The date is still open, Olivia, Helen continued, for whatever you might want to use it for. A birthday celebration, perhaps, or just a day in the gardens with people you love. Thank you, I managed to say through the tightness in my throat. Thank you for telling me. After hanging up, I found Maddie in her room, homework spread across her bed. She looked up when I entered, immediately reading my expression. Helen called, I said. She bit her lip, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. Are you mad? I sat beside her on the, and how did you do it? Access the trust? I didn't. Exactly, she admitted. I asked Mr. Davidson about it when you were meeting with the florist last month. Told him I was working on a financial literacy project for school and wanted to understand how trusts work. I couldn't help but smile at her resourcefulness. And I asked if there was a way to ensure specific things Dad wanted could be honored. He said that as the trustee, you have the final say, but that I could write a formal request as a beneficiary. She pulled open her desk drawer and removed a folder, handing it to me. I wrote this. Mr. Davidson helped me with the legal parts. Inside was a carefully composed letter written in Maddie's neat handwriting on formal stationery. To the trustee of the Bennett Family Trust. As a beneficiary of the trust established by my father, Craig Bennett, I formally request that funds previously allocated for the Rosewood Manor wedding venue remain dedicated to their original purpose. While the wedding event has been canceled, the venue itself holds significant meaning as one of the last decisions my mother and I made that honored our family's values and memories. Maintaining access to this space, even if used for a different purpose in the future, preserves an important connection to my father's legacy of providing beautiful experiences for our family. I believe this request is in keeping with the spirit of my father's intentions for the trust to support significant family milestones and memories. Respectfully submitted, Madison Bennett below was an official acknowledgement from the bank approving the request and confirming the transfer of funds. I looked up from the letter to find Maddie watching me anxiously. The money was supposed to be for something that mattered, she said simply. That place mattered to us. I pulled her into a fierce hug, overwhelmed by the wisdom and love contained in this child I was privileged to raise. You are so much like your father, I whispered against her hair. So very much. She hugged me back just as tightly. Is that okay? That I did it without asking? I pulled back to look at her. More than okay. It was brilliant and thoughtful and exactly right. Relief crossed her face. I thought maybe we could have a party there anyway, for your birthday or mine, or just because, with people who actually care about us. I think that's a wonderful idea, I agreed, and I think your dad would approve completely. That evening, as Maddie slept, I found myself drawn to the box of Craig's personal items I kept in my closet. It wasn't something I looked through often. In the early years after his death, those mementos had been too painful to face. But now, I felt a strange compulsion to connect with him, to seek his wisdom even in absence. Inside were his favorite books, his watch, the silly world's best dad mug Maddie had given him that he used every morning despite its garish colors. And beneath those, a sealed envelope with my name on it. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated just a few weeks before he died. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, something has happened to me, and for that, I'm sorrier than I can express. I've always believed in being prepared, but writing this feels like tempting fate. Still, there are things I need you to know just in case. The financial arrangements I've made will ensure you and Maddie are taken care of. Davidson will explain everything. The money isn't just about security. It's about freedom. Freedom to make choices based on love rather than necessity. Freedom to build the life you want, not the one circumstances force upon you. I know you, Olivia. I know your strength, your kindness, your fierce loyalty. I also know your tendency to compromise too much, to put others' needs before your own. Don't lose yourself in my absence. Don't settle for less than you deserve. Teach Maddie to recognize her own worth. Show her that love shouldn't require the surrender of self. Let her see you standing tall, making hard choices, honoring your own heart. Whatever path you choose, know that my love for you both transcends whatever separates us now. I am with you always, even when I am gone. Forever yours, Craig, I pressed, the letter to my chest, tears flowing freely now. All this time, these words had been waiting for me. This message across time and space. This final gift from the man who had known me so well, perhaps better than I knew myself. In walking away, from a marriage that would have diminished me, I had somehow honored not just my own worth, but Craig's memory as well. In teaching Maddie to speak truth even when it was difficult, I was fulfilling the very wish he had expressed in this letter. For the first time since breaking off the engagement, I felt not just peaceful, but certain. The future stretched before us, undefined but full of possibility. Whatever came next, Maddie and I would face it together, on our own terms, with the quiet strength Craig had recognized in us both. I carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. Some messages need to be read just once to be carried forever in the heart. I knew without any doubt that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would not forget what I had almost lost, and what I had ultimately found in the aftermath of a canceled wedding venue and a daughter brave enough to reveal the truth. 6 months after. The wedding that never was, Maddie and I stood at the entrance to Rosewood Manor. It was her 11th birthday, and true to her suggestion, we had decided to reclaim the venue for a celebration that was truly ours. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and late-blooming flowers. Helen had outdone herself, stringing fairy lights through the oak trees and arranging rustic wooden tables on the stone terrace. No assigned seating, no place cards embossed with family crests. Just comfortable spaces for the people we loved, to gather and celebrate. "Ready?" I asked Maddie, who looked beautiful and so grown up in her new burgundy dress, the color she had chosen herself, not the pale pink Vivian had once insisted would be more appropriate for a young lady. She nodded, a smile spreading across her face as she spotted her friends already exploring the garden paths. "It's perfect, Mom." And it was, not because it was elaborate or impressive, but because it was authentic. Every detail reflected choices we had made together, from the playlist of Craig's favorite songs to the simple wildflower centerpieces arranged by Maddie and her friends the day before. As guests arrived, my design clients who had become friends, Maddie's teachers, neighbors who had supported us through Craig's death and the broken engagement, a few carefully chosen relatives who had never made us feel we needed to be anything other than ourselves, I felt a profound sense of rightness. These were our people, This was our community. Even Amelia came, arriving without Gregory and bringing a thoughtful gift for Maddie, an art set far more practical and meaningful than the ornate silver keepsake box Vivian would have chosen. She hugged me warmly, then drew back to study my face. "You look happy," she observed. "It suits you." "I am happy," I replied, realizing as I said it how true it was. "How are things at Hargrove House?" I asked. She rolled her eyes. "Mother is still, occasionally mourning for the match she lost. Nathan. Dating someone new already? A second cousin of the Thornfields with the right pedigree and appropriate deference to family traditions." "And you?" I asked, noticing a new lightness in her demeanor. A small, secretive smile played at her lips. "I've made some changes, started a separate foundation independent from the family business, rented my own apartment in the city." She glanced around at the celebration. "You inspired me, watching you choose your own path." Before I could respond, Maddie bounded over, eager to show Amelia the mural she'd been painting. As they walked toward the conservatory, heads bent together in conversation, I marveled at how life unfolds in unexpected ways. In losing a sister-in-law, I might have gained a true friend. Throughout the evening, I found myself repeatedly drawn to the oak tree where Nathan and I had once stood, planning our vows. The memory no longer stung. Instead, I felt gratitude for the clarity that had come, painfully but necessarily, before it was too late. As the party wound down, Helen approached me, a glass of wine in hand. "Successful event, I'd say," she commented, nodding toward Maddie, who was laughing with her friends by the fire pit. "Much better energy than a Hargrove wedding would have had." I smiled. "Much more us." "I had a feeling about you, she said, her weathered face thoughtful. "The day you first visited with Nathan, you looked at everything with such genuine appreciation while he checked his watch and asked about Wi-Fi signals." She shrugged. "Not my place to say anything of course. I wish you had," I admitted. "I might have seen things sooner." Helen shook her head. "Some realizations can't be rushed. They come when you're ready to receive them." As the last guests departed and Maddie helped her friends gather their belongings, I wandered to the edge of the small pond that bordered the property. The moon cast a silver path across the water, and the night was quiet, except for the occasional rustling of leaves and distant laughter. I thought about the journey of the past year, from engagement to cancellation, from confusion to clarity, from compromise to conviction. I thought about what I might say to other women standing where I had stood, trying to shrink themselves to fit into spaces too small for their spirits. "Mom?" Maddie's voice broke through my reverie. She joined me at the water's edge, wrapping her cardigan more tightly around herself in the cooling night air. "What are you thinking about?" "Journeys," I told her. "About choices. About how sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the truest paths." She nodded solemnly, somehow understanding exactly what I meant. "Do you ever regret it? Not marrying Nathan?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret that I didn't see sooner what was happening. I regret that I was willing to compromise so much of myself. But no, I don't regret the decision itself." "Good," she said firmly. "Because you deserve someone who sees you. Really sees you." I smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "So do you, my wise girl. So do all of us." We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight dance on the water. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice softer. "Do you think you'll ever get married? To someone else, I mean." "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I'm open to the possibility of love, but I'm not searching for it. I'm not afraid of being on my own anymore." "You're not on your own," she corrected me. "You have me." I pressed a kiss to the top of her head, her hair smelling of birthday cake and wood smoke. "Yes, I do. And you have me. Always." In the months That followed, I found myself sharing our story more openly, first with close friends, then in a blog post that unexpectedly went viral, and eventually in small women's groups that asked me to speak about resilience and self-worth. I never set out to become an advocate for authentic choices. I wasn't trying to build a platform or create a movement. I was simply telling the truth of what I had learned, that love which requires the diminishment of self is not really love at all. That family legacies are only worth preserving if they honor the dignity of each member. That sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from a future that would cost us our own voice. Each time I shared our story, other stories came back to me. Women who had married into families that slowly eroded their sense of self. Men who had recognized too late the patterns of control in their relationships. Young people struggling to honor their own paths while respecting family traditions. All of them searching for the courage to make choices aligned with their deepest values. To recognize relationships that nourish, rather than deplete. To build foundations strong enough to support true partnership. A year to the day after what would have been my wedding, I received an email that stopped me in my tracks. It was from Nathan. Olivia, I've started and deleted this message a dozen times, unsure if I should reach out or let the past remain in the past. But something you once said to me has been echoing in my mind. You can't fix this because you don't see what's broken. I think I'm finally beginning to see. I've been in therapy for the past 6 months, not because I'm trying to win you back. I know that door is closed and rightly so. But because I realized I was repeating patterns in my new relationship that were doomed to create the same problems. You were right about my mother, about my inability to establish boundaries, about so many things I wasn't ready to hear then. I'm writing not to ask for forgiveness, but to thank you. Your courage in walking away forced me to confront truths I might otherwise have avoided my entire life. Maddie's bravery in speaking up showed me what genuine integrity looks like. I hope you're both well and happy. You deserve nothing less. Nathan, Shy. Sat with the email for a long time before showing it to Maddie. We were eating ice cream on the back porch, a Sunday evening ritual we had maintained through all the changes of the past year. Wow, she said after reading it. Do you think he really means it? I think he's trying to, I replied. Growth is rarely a straight line, but it sounds like he's making an honest effort. Maddie handed my phone back. Are you going to respond? Nodded. Yes, not today, but I will. Acknowledgement of growth matters, even if it doesn't change the past. She considered this, then nodded in agreement. It's like what you always say about forgiving people. What's that? That forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about not letting it control your future. I smiled, continually amazed by this child who absorbed life's lessons and reflected them back with such clarity. Exactly that. As the sun set on another day, I thought about all the women who might be sitting at similar crossroads, questioning relationships that diminish them, facing decisions that require immense courage, wondering if they're overreacting to red flags their intuition recognizes, but their conscious mind dismisses. I wished I could tell each of them what I now knew with bone-deep certainty, that walking away from the wrong relationship, no matter how far along the path you've traveled, is never a failure. It's an act of profound self-respect, that the voices telling you to compromise your core needs, whether they come from prospective in-laws, partners, or society at large, are voices you can choose not to heed. That saying no to what diminishes you creates space for yes to what fulfills you. If my story resonates with you, if it reminds you of a moment when you had to choose between peace and truth, between belonging and authenticity, know this: you are not alone. The path of genuine self-worth is rarely the easiest one, but it is always, always the one that leads to real joy. Trust the voice inside you that recognizes when something isn't right, even when everyone around you insists it's fine. listen to your children when they speak uncomfortable truths you've been avoiding. Honor the legacy of those who loved you by refusing to settle for less than real partnership. And remember that sometimes the wedding that doesn't happen is the greatest gift you could receive. The plans that fall apart might be making way for a life more aligned with who you truly are. The venue that gets canceled might lead you to a celebration more meaningful than you ever imagined. Maddie and I didn't get the wedding we thought we wanted. But we got something far more valuable. The unshakable knowledge that we are enough exactly as we are. That our voices matter. That our choices count. And in the end, that knowledge is the foundation of every genuine relationship. Every authentic connection. Every life lived with integrity and purpose. If this story touched something in you, if it gave you courage or clarity or simply a moment of recognition, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experience of choosing yourself. Subscribe to hear more. Stories of women finding their way back to their own truth. Because while my story is just one among many, the pattern it reveals is universal. When we honor our deepest knowing, when we refuse to be diminished, when we choose authentic love over hollow approval, we don't just change our own lives. We create ripples that touch everyone around us. Just ask my daughter, who watched her mother find the courage to say no to a future that would have slowly erased her. Just ask Amelia, who found inspiration to create her own independence. Just ask Nathan, who finally began to recognize patterns that would have limited his entire life. One choice made with clarity and conviction can change everything. And it begins with believing that you deserve nothing less than complete respect for who you are. It begins with knowing beyond any doubt that the right people will never ask you to be less in order to be loved. It begins with you. 3 years after the wedding that wasn't, I stood in my expanded design studio surveying the space that had grown from a home office into a thriving business with 4 employees. The Bennett Design Group had become known for creating spaces that truly reflected the people who inhabited them, authentic, functional, and deeply personal. No cookie-cutter elegance, no designs meant to impress rather than nurture. My phone buzzed with a text from Maddie, now 13, and in the midst of that beautiful, turbulent transition from child to young woman. Don't forget dinner at 7. Made reservations. Got a surprise for you. I smiled, wondering what my ever-resourceful daughter had planned. Since taking a part-time job at the local bookstore, she had developed a new level of independence, proud of her ability to contribute and create. As I gathered my things to leave, I glanced at the framed letter on my wall, Craig's final words to us, now displayed where I could see it every day. Not as a shrine to the past, but as a compass pointing toward the future. Don't settle for less than you deserve, I read aloud, running my fingers over the glass. I won't, I promised him, and myself. That evening, as Maddie led me to a corner table at Lucio's, my favorite Italian restaurant, I was surprised to see Helen from Rosewood Manor waiting for us, along with my closest friend, Tara. "What's all this?" I asked, laughing as Maddie pulled out my chair with a flourish. "A celebration," Maddie announced, "for your new partnership with Westside Development." I shook my head in amazement. I had only signed the contract that morning, the largest project my firm had ever undertaken, designing the interiors for an entire sustainable housing community. "How did you know already?" "Michael called me," Tara admitted, referring to my new business partner. "We've been planning this for weeks, just waiting for you to sign." As we shared plates of pasta and glasses of wine, sparkling cider for Maddie, I looked around the table at these women who had supported me through every step of rebuilding my life. Helen, who had taught me about recognizing authenticity in others. Tara, who had held my hand through the darkest days after breaking the engagement. And Maddie, my North Star, whose wisdom continued to amaze me daily. "I have something for you," Helen said, sliding an envelope across the table. "A client came to Rosewood last week, looking for a venue for her son's wedding. She mentioned they had trouble finding a designer who understood what they wanted. Something personal rather than showy. I gave her your card. I opened the envelope to find a referral for not just one client, but potentially an entire community of families who valued exactly the approach to design that had become my signature. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved. This means so much. You earned it, Helen replied simply, by being exactly who you are. Later, as Maddie and I walked home under a canopy of stars, she slipped her hand into mine, a gesture becoming rarer as she grew older, making it all the more precious when it happened. I'm proud of you, Mom, she said quietly. For the new contract? I asked. She shook her head. For everything. For showing me what it looks like to choose yourself. In that moment, I knew that whatever we had lost in walking away from the Hargroves and their world of privilege and control, we had gained something infinitely more valuable. A life of our own making, built on the foundation of genuine love, mutual respect, and the courage to speak our truth. Some paths diverge, and the choice between them defines not just where we go, but who we become along the way. 3 years ago, I had chosen the harder path, the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.